Welcome to the webinar, Creating Game-Changing Strategic Alliances. Thank you all for attending today. So the most significant referrals, well, we think about these referrals, we think about client referrals, strategic alliance referrals, referrals from prospects. There's all sorts of referrals that we can get. But as we find, the most significant referrals are falling into two specific categories. So we've done some research at Red Zone Marketing and have found, in fact, we've done this research since 2003 over and over and over again amongst only top producers. So we're not looking at the entire base, we're looking at those that are grossing $1 million year in and year out, and we're trying to look at the same advisors every year, but we also add additional ones on. And we look at where do they get their new business from. And so if you can look at this particular graphic right now, you'll see that when we last did this survey, which was in 2016, most of the business that comes from those that are actively out seeking new business are from referrals. So they're either client referrals or they're strategic alliance referrals. And combined, those make up over 50% of where the new business comes from. And this is for active people who are looking to bring in net new production. And so when we look at that, we look at, okay, so we've got a lot of referrals coming in. And so I asked you on this call today, are you getting your fair share of referrals? And we're specifically talking about strategic alliance referrals today because of the advisors that we have surveyed, and also lots of surveys outside of our Red Zone Marketing research, finds that the best clients actually come from strategic alliance referrals. Yet, very few financial advisors actually find success in trying to develop these partnerships. So, in fact, it's very sad statistics because about 99% of attempted strategic alliance relationships fail. And that means that you go to lunch with someone, they say they want to refer business to you, you want to refer business to them, it's all great, you're meeting with a CPA or an attorney or something like that, and then nothing ever happens. Well, something happens, you give referrals, but they don't give any in return. And you think to yourself, why? Why is this happening? And so we looked at this. We wanted to find out if actually the best new business was coming from strategic alliances, yet most financial advisors were not finding success in their strategic alliance partnerships. The question was why? And so you've probably attended other presentations where people will say, here's what you need to do to get more strategic alliance relationships. And you try them, you send out baskets at tax time to accountants, and it never really works. And you think, I don't know how other people are doing it, but it's not working for me. And so what we did at Red Zone Marketing is we actually conducted some very specific research, and it was actually brought on by another large financial firm that asked us to conduct this research. And we wanted to look at why it's not working as opposed to just, hey, here are some of the tactics you use to make it work. And then to be able to figure out, okay, so if these are the reasons very specifically it's not working, what then can we do to change those results? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we looked at our research on centers of influence or strategic alliances, we actually looked at 9 successful case studies, those that are doing it really, really well. And we looked at all the things that they were doing. And then we looked at actually outside of these 9 areas, which are totally different in terms of they're not all CPA firm alliances, they're not all attorney alliances. We looked at lots of different categories. And these particular center of influence relationships generate more than $1 million year in and year out in terms of gross for the financial advisors that we conducted this research on. But we also looked at those that are not making it successful and what are the differences. And that's where the real complex part of this research came in, because it wasn't just what they were doing right today. What did they do right a long time ago to make this work from the very beginning? Because what we found with the successful relationships is usually we could tell success, they could tell success at the very first meeting. It didn't happen years later. It happened at the very first meeting. And so what happened there? And so that's what we're going to talk about. So there's three things that we found that can be done to dramatically improve strategic alliance success. And they fall right into the category of what we're doing wrong today. So that's what we're going to talk about. The first thing is, when you're thinking about meeting with a new potential strategic alliance partner, maybe it's a CPA, maybe it's an attorney, estate planning attorney, a divorce attorney, an M&A attorney, and you're sitting down with them, oftentimes we haven't asked questions before we actually got into that position of sitting down. And one of the things that we found that's really, really critical is that before you ever sit down with them, it might be smart to think about and to ask them about their new business development. Because one of the things that we found is that if this other potential strategic alliance partner, is not growing their business, meaning that they're not actively out searching for new business, they will almost always not be a very good partner for you. And so you think, well, why is that? Well, if you ask this question, are you growing your business? And the answer is yes. They have the same mindset and philosophy as you do in terms of seeking new clients, wanting to do more business with more people, out in the community, talking to people, networking, on the phone, doing whatever it takes to bring in new business. And the reason that we found that this is such a key, if they're not growing their business, it doesn't mean that they're not successful. It just means that, there's a lot of CPA firms who are stagnant in that they're not out looking for new clients. They have a full business. They are busy. And so those are oftentimes the types of CPA firms that we would say, hey, they would be a great strategic alliance partner because they work with a lot of clients like I work with, or I know they work with a lot of successful people. I'd like to work with them. But in reality, if they're not out meeting new people, they do not have the opportunity to talk about you. Now, think about the reality. If you're out to lunch with someone and you talk about, hey, let's refer business back and forth, and everybody says, yes, they're going to do it, and then you go back to your business and you wait for the phone to ring, and they never call. Well, one of the reasons that they don't call is perhaps because they're going back to their business and continuing what they were doing before. And they're not going to call up a client that they've had for 15 years and say, hey, I just had lunch with this financial advisor. You should call him. There's not a real urgent reason to do that. And they don't have the opportunities. Now, if they're meeting with somebody that's a brand new prospect, and they'll say, hey, who are you working with? Do you have an estate planning attorney? Do you have a financial advisor? Oh, yeah, I have a financial advisor, but I don't really like him. Oh, well, I've got someone you need to see. And so this is a really key answer. The answer must be, yes, we are growing our business, because if not, they're unlikely to be a successful partner if they're not out seeking new clients. Now, you may be able to find something that you say, well, that's not exactly true because I've had a situation where this happened, but it is unlikely. And so if we're thinking about our best chance to get referrals from a strategic alliance partner, it's probably not with those that are stagnant in their business. A lot of times they might be a partner in a firm, but they're the younger partners. They're not the older partners. So the second thing that we found when we did our research is that we have to also figure out, if they are growing their business, where they're getting their new business from. And this was the key to failure. The key to failure with most of the financial advisors who do not have successful referral partnerships with a strategic alliance, it is because of this. We have to ask the question, if they say they're growing your business, where does most of your new business come from? Where are you getting your new business from? And they may say, oh, we're getting it from referrals. From who? Because the reality is most CPAs in this particular case get a lot of their new business, if not all of their new business, from financial advisors. And so think about that. If I'm a financial advisor and I give some business to my CPA, who we have this strategic alliance partnership, I send one of my clients over to him, he cannot then turn around and give that business to someone else. And you look and you say, well, they've got a full business, they've got all these people they're working with. Yes, but if they got the business from a financial advisor, they cannot turn around and give that business to someone else. They need to have more organic strategies, more referral strategies from internal, not from financial advisors. This is the reason, the highest reason that financial advisors do not get referrals from CPAs is because of this. They're not getting their business. They're getting their business from others that look just like you do, and they can't turn around and give it away. So the third thing, and the thing that we're going to spend the most time on today, is actually, if we answer those two questions, those are not difficult questions to ask, and we're going to get an answer. And oftentimes we're not going to get the answer we want, but at least we're not going to be spending a bunch of time out having lunch with people and really not being successful at it. We have to give ourselves the best chance by asking those first two questions. And then what we found is there's actually a litmus test to the success that happens at the very first meeting. And it requires having a meaningful connection. Now, oftentimes the first meeting is, well, we're just going to get to know each other. And there's not maybe a lot of preparation. Well, I'd like to talk about what we can do to make sure that that first meeting, and there is an absolute litmus test of something that potential strategic alliance needs to say in the meeting for it to be successful. And almost always when they say this, it will be a successful partnership right off the bat, right at the first meeting. So let's take a step back for a second. And what's the biggest mistake that financial professionals perhaps make in their marketing? And it's not necessarily what we think it is. It's not necessarily that we're not, posting enough on social media, or we're not, attending enough networking events. The biggest mistake that financial professionals make in marketing is that we do not message ourselves properly to the other person. We're not saying things that are immediately compelling to the other person. And I'll give you a for instance. You say you go to a business function and someone says, "Oh, what do you do?" And you say, "Well, I'm a financial advisor." Does that make them want to speak with you more or less? Well, the answer is less, and it's less every single time. And so think about the logic of that. You're at the business function to attract people to you. And the only thing you're doing by the power of your own words is to repel them from you. I mean, we have a messaging problem. And the problem isn't one that you created, but it absolutely and certainly is one that we need to have a solution for. We need to have better messaging so that people pay attention in a different way. Most people's first reaction to a financial advisor, and I don't care if it's an attorney that you're meeting with that's a potential strategic alliance or it's a potential client, they think you're going to sell them something. And nobody wants to be sold anything. So what can we do? Well, if you think about a prospect for your business, if you were going to meet with the prospect and that prospect had $11 million in assets that they could invest with you, you might think to yourself, well, wow, I've got to do a lot of research. I've got to prepare. This is a big prospect I'm going to meet with. And so you do a lot of research and you do all sorts of things to figure out how you can go in and have the best meeting possible with this $11 million prospect. Well, the reality is that a good strategic alliance partnership, according to statistics, should be worth at least $11 million in new business year in and year out. And so when you sit down with a potential strategic alliance, they're actually like sitting down with an $11 million prospect. And if we think about it that way, we might actually do some things a little bit differently. And so I want to give you some examples of the preparation that can be done and the preparation that has been done by lots of financial advisors to create this messaging that's super successful. So if I'm going to meet with a potential CPA or someone, actually, let's say I'm going to meet with a potential attorney that works with other attorneys, like knows a lot of other attorneys. And this could be a great strategic alliance for you, referring other attorneys to you. And instead of going into that meeting, knowing that this attorney actually works with other attorneys, you might say, well, maybe I'll look on LinkedIn. Maybe I'll figure out who they work with. And that's when I discover, my gosh, they're connected to lots of other attorneys. Whatever the case may be, you find what their target market is. And then you make a connection between that target market and something that you do that is different, something that perhaps they haven't heard of every single day. And so we've got a financial advisor that actually works with lots of attorneys. And he doesn't come in saying, hey, you know, we work with high net worth people, we work with individuals, we work with families, we work with everyone, and we can probably work with a lot of your clients, which is actually true, but it's not compelling. The compelling part is you go in and you say, I know you work with a lot of attorneys. We actually do too. One of the things that we've been able to do is figure out a way to create what we call a contingency funding portfolio model specifically for attorneys. Attorneys oftentimes have large inflows of cash at irregular times. They win a big case, and so they've got different things that are happening in their lives. We've got to have a portfolio that is ready for these large inflows of cash. And so we have created what we call a contingency funding portfolio model just for attorneys. And so it's not, you know, this particular example is not one where you're saying, hey, you know, we do lots of investment management and we work on risk management and we do these things. It's a lot of in one ear and out the other. But if you talk about a specific strategy that you have for a specific kind of person that they also work with, they are a lot more interested, and you have a better chance of reaching the litmus test, which we'll get to in a second. So here's another example. We've got a financial advisor who went in to meet with a CPA for the very first time. And before he went in to meet with the CPA, he did a lot of research. Now, he already knew something about the CPA because he was referred to the CPA by a mutual client that they had. And that mutual client happened to be a top executive at a big Fortune 500 firm. And so he also, you know, looked on LinkedIn, he talked to his client, he tried to find as much intel as he could before he went into that meeting with the CPA. And when he got into the meeting with the CPA, he didn't say, we work with individuals and families and businesses and high net worth people and lots of executives. He talked about the fact that they have a client in common and what he specifically did for that particular client, as they do with lots of other clients. He says, we have a system for managing stock options. We find that a lot of executives, they're very busy, they're not keeping track of the stock options, and we've got an entire system for managing the stock options for executives. And he talks about the system that he has in place. And that was very positive because the financial advisor then heard this, which is the litmus test. Oh my gosh, I've got like 3 executives you need to see. I've got someone you need to see. And that is the litmus test that must happen at the very first meeting. If they don't say, I've got somebody you need to see, we haven't nailed it. We haven't hit the nail on the head with a message that's compelling. And we can do this in almost every single situation if we take the time to prepare. So we have another client who, and we did some research on, this was part of our research project, where he was talking about how he works with lots of executives. And he finds that he has a very successful partnership with Strategic Alliances because he does not go in saying, you know, we work with all these people. He specifically talks about a process they have for dealing with, communicating with, conducting reviews with busy executives. He said, we only really work with very busy executives. In fact, our executives are traveling all over the country, they're traveling all over the world in some cases, but they still need to be in touch with their financial situation. So we have a process for having webinars, and he talks about the webinar process that they have for speaking with clients. He talks about the way that they communicate, the portal that they have where they can put documents and they can communicate back and forth. Now, by the way, every single thing that I've mentioned on this call, this is the 3rd example of some messaging. You do all of these things probably already. It's not like you don't have ways of managing stock options or you don't have a process for dealing with busy executives. You probably do. It's a matter of messaging it at the right time with the right kind of person who has those kinds of clients in their client base. We've got another financial advisor, and he works with lots of business owners. So he's meeting with a potential strategic alliance prospect, and he says to them, because he knows that they also work with a lot of business owners that are having liquidity events. And so instead of going in and saying, yeah, we work with business owners too, specifically talks about the liquidity events that they've been involved with business owners. He says, now to date, we've worked with about 60 business owners who have successfully sold their business and moved on to the next stage of their career. We've helped them go through this process by doing X, Y, and Z. And so it is a way of being super specific as opposed to super general. And the only way we can be super specific is if we do the research in advance to find out, well, how can I make this connection with this person? And you really have to go in with being much more narrow than most people like. So the strategic alliance litmus test is when the potential strategic alliance says to you in the very first meeting, I have someone you need to see. I have someone you need to see, because then you know that you have gotten it right. Now, we're not going to get it right every single time, and you can also wing this. You might ask them in the meeting, tell me a little bit more about the kinds of clients you work with, and they may say something that then can trigger some of these things that you can then be very specific about as the way you help physicians or the way you help whomever it is. And it doesn't have to be that it's so remarkably unique that no one else has ever done this. But the fact that you bring it up and talk about the specific nature of the way that you work with that type of person shows that you have expertise. And if it's something that they're interested in or believe that their clients really need, then they will generate that referral. And they will say, I've got someone you need to see. That's when you know it works, because otherwise they're not going back to their office and thinking about who they can refer to, who they can refer to you after having a nice lunch with you. And that's why it never happens, because they come back and they get back to their regular business. Now, you give referrals to them because you're probably much more active in the space of bringing on new clients. And if you're bringing on new clients, you've got the opportunity to say, hey, do you have an estate planning attorney? Well, I've got someone you need to see. And it just doesn't work both ways, not all the time. So we don't have to have something 100% completely unique and compelling about you, but we do have to have something that is 100% completely unique for a particular kind of client. And so it's a little bit different mindset than if we go in and we say, we do something that no one else does. Now, if you do that, that's wonderful. But if you don't do that, we have to find a way to make that connection. And so if we break it down, how do you build these valuable conversations? And it's pretty simple in terms of the process to do it. It may not be simple to actually go through and do it, but the process itself. So building valuable conversations starts with, who are their clients? And this information you can find out by, again, going on LinkedIn. You may need to get a special Sales Navigator or one of the premium processes that they have for doing search on LinkedIn. It used to be that you could do lots and lots of searches, and today they've pretty much limited it to a certain amount unless you have a premium, if you buy the premium service within LinkedIn. And if you do that, you can do lots and lots of searches. So figure out who are their clients. And one of the things you can do when you're inside and doing a LinkedIn search is to figure out, okay, who do I know that they know? And maybe I should make a phone call to somebody that I know that's also connected with them and say, hey, I'm meeting with this guy next week. Can you tell me a little bit about him? Can you tell me a little bit about his business? And those calls are invaluable. I wouldn't use maybe the internal LinkedIn sending a message. I would actually just pick up the phone and call someone that you know and ask them about this person that you're going to go meet with. It's the intel that allows you to have the best messaging. And the second thing is, what can you do to add value specifically for their clients? So if you think about just making an Excel spreadsheet and you list the client, the potential strategic alliance prospect, I mean, and then you list who are their clients, and then you list, well, what can we do specifically, or what have we done specifically to help out those kinds of clients? Like, what are the talking points that we could have? And then finally, so how then do you message this with value powerfully and memorably? And that's the biggest challenge, is to figure out how to put it together. But if we are prepared, we will go in and be able to have a really good, concise message. Now you say, well, I don't know that I want to have such a specific, narrow message going in to see someone, because what if that just doesn't turn out to be something that's interesting to them? Well, that could be the case, and you're always going to run into that situation. So there's a couple solutions for that. One is you have more than one specific conversation in your pocket, or you just know that I'm going to be better off having a specific conversation than going in and being general, because going in and being general usually doesn't have much success, which again is one of the reasons that 99% of attempted strategic alliance partnerships fail. They do not work because of the reasons that I talked about. It's either the wrong person, it's the wrong type of business. You know, they're not out there actively looking for new people. They're getting all their business from other financial advisors, or we just haven't been able to communicate with them in a way that gets them to say, I've got someone you need to see, in that very first meeting. So here are the questions again. Who are their clients? What can you do to add value specifically for their clients? How can you message your value both powerfully and memorably? And the answer to the third question is by being super prepared. You don't have to have something that's incredibly unique just to be super prepared. So the other thing is, when you're talking about in general, so you might have these specific things that you're talking about that you do, but then they may ask you, well, tell me about your entire practice. Tell me about all the other things that you do. And one of the ways of describing that becomes more memorable and becomes more powerful is to be able to have a way to say this where you actually are drawing it out while you say it. And the reason that I say that is not to go back in time. It's simply to be more memorable. And if we see something and we hear something, we have a much greater likelihood of remembering it. In fact, it goes from like 30% to over 70% if you have some kind of a visual attached with what you're saying. And so if you're sitting there with a potential strategic alliance and you draw 3 circles and you say, now what we do is investing redefined. And what I mean by that is we don't do probably what you think we do. We're not just an investment shop. Let me tell you about the 3 things that we do in general in our office. And so now you're going from the specific, here's how we help attorneys, to more of the, here's the big picture of how we help people, here's our process. And so this particular advisor talks about outcome-based planning, and he literally draws the 3 circles in like a Venn diagram, and then he writes in the first circle, outcome-based planning. And then he writes in the second circle, investment management. And then in the third circle, he writes intellectual capital. And so he's talking in the first circle about this kind of planning that they do and why they do this planning and why it's so valuable. So telling them why they should be interested in this because of the outcomes that happen. And then when he talks about investment management, he's telling them why it's important that they have institutional level research and that they have this these triggers for being able to make changes in the accounts based on what's happening in the economy, and talking about how often they review the accounts with the client. And then when he gets to the intellectual capital, he talks about, well, let me tell you a little bit about our team and what we do on our team. And instead of just saying, you know, we've got 250 years of combined experience, which basically just means you're pretty old, he talks about, no, listen, I've been in this business for 25 years. I've been through 13 major downturns of the market. On our team, I specialize in protecting client assets. I've got a lot of experience doing that. I've got someone else who's got a CFP. Let me tell you what a CFP is. Let me tell you why they have a CFP and what they do and how they use that with our clients in terms of planning. And so it's giving them a little bit more information about what you do, but doing it in a segmented way with a visual, which actually increases the memory. And if they can remember what you do, they've got a much better chance of being able to tell one of their clients about you. You could also do a capability stack. We've been doing lots of capability stacks lately for financial advisors and insurance professionals because they really need to be able to better explain in a memorable way. And so a capability stack is basically a 5-slide, sometimes it's a few more slides than that, deck talking about, let me tell you about what we do. Let me tell you what our purpose is. Let me tell you about our differentiation. Let me tell you about our solutions and our intellectual capital, which is the 3 circles, right, along with the outcomes. And so if you're talking in a way where you've got some really good visuals, again, you might have a chance of getting the memory going. And the reason that we like the capability stack is because this can be done in a webinar. This can be done more professionally on an iPad or something like that, but it still has the same effect of having the visual. So overall, success is really about executing on the red zone moments. And there is not a person on this call that couldn't pick up the phone today and find a strategic partnership that could potentially meet with them. The problem isn't finding the people to meet with. The problem is being able to find the right people to meet with who are out looking for new business, not getting all their new business from other financial advisors, and someone who has some clients that you might have some very specific things that you can help with. And so you've got everything in front of you. It's just a matter of pulling it together. And I think that that's overall the message of this webinar, is that you have all the capabilities to do everything that I've already talked about. It's a matter of just pulling it together, asking the right questions, being prepared for an $11 million prospect, and then going and doing it. So there's a few things that I'd like to offer at the end of this webinar. Number one, we've got a messaging worksheet. And if you email Denise in my office at info@redzonemarketing.com, she will send you back the messaging worksheet. And that messaging worksheet will just help you walk through and figure out ways to message yourself in particular situations. And so it just asks a bunch of questions and you can answer them and you can do it yourself. We also are willing to do a review of your current strategic alliance value proposition. So if you're going in and you're going to go see someone and you've done the preparation for an $11 million prospect, if you would like us, me particularly, to take a look at that, email it also to info@redzonemarketing.com. Denise will pass that along to me. I will respond to you immediately and say, I received it, and here's how long it's going to take me to get through it, because a lot of times you might go, well, I've got this meeting tomorrow. I want to make sure that she gets this message. And so my assistant will quickly forward it to me. I will take a look at it, and I will let you know when I will get back to you on it. And if you've got a specific deadline, let me know. But I would love to review these for you, because I would love to see the results of strategic alliance partnerships go from a failure rate of 99% to a success rate of over 70%. And I think for the people that are on this call, it is definitely possible. And the final thing is, if you do want us to do some work with you, meaning actually do the writing, we do this all the time for value propositions, for messaging on websites, for referral messaging, messaging for videos. We work almost exclusively today on strategy and messaging. And the messaging is, well, what should I say? How do I form these profitable relationships? I've got this meeting next week. I need someone to talk to that can help me, that will write it out for me, that will put the best powerful script together. And that's what we do. So for any meetings, big prospect meetings, we've got either an hourly rate or we've got some different ways that we charge people to be able to do this, because it's really critical, and there's not a lot of consultants out there that have the expertise to do this. So either send it to us and I'll tell you what I think about it, or send it to me or schedule an appointment with me, and we can actually sit down and do it for you. So thank you so much for being a part of this webinar today. I am grateful for you being on this webinar and for taking the time to listen in. If you have any questions, please let us know. And again, this web class was brought to you by Insurance WebEx, who have sponsored me to do this today, and I am grateful for them. So thank you very much.